Ryan Murphy isn't the worst thing to happen to television. That's Robert Aguirre-Sacasa or David Zaslav or Netflix or AI. But of the non-essential threats to media, he is the most aggravating. The annoying thing about Ryan is that he does have talent. He is almost incapable of not putting out shows that bring in devoted audiences and critical acclaim, and his work with Glee genuinely, and without hyperbole, normalized queerness on mainstream television in a way that cannot be understated. There is very much a TV before Glee and TV after thing going on, and I can respect that. He's well respected in the industry for the most part, bar a few recent missteps, which we will get into, and he's got this aura of auteur around him, and you can see why. His projects are frequently boundary-pushing in terms of queer representation, attempts at complex female characters, put a pin in this, and dark subject matter, and I respect his ability to make big swings and then back it up. Unfortunately, Ryan Murphy's brand of progressive television is deeply misogynistic and fetishistic, and I'm tired of pretending it's not.
This game has gone on long enough. Shit.
Most of you know who Ryan Murphy is, but in case you don't, here's a quick recap to get you up to speed. Ryan Murphy is a writer, director, and producer who made his start in television with Popular and Nip Tuck, and then cemented his career with the creation of Glee.
As you no doubt have heard, I've taken over for the coach of Oral Intensity.
We heard you pushed him down the stairs.
No, you can't prove that.
This is just sort of how she talks.
He has since gone on to create and produce, direct and write on, to varying degrees, American Horror Story, Scream Queens, Feud Betty and Joan, Pose, Ratched, 911, The Watcher, The Politician, American Crime Story, Monster, Dr. Odyssey, and his newest outing, All's Fair. Now, obviously, Ryan Murphy is not a one-man show, much as the media likes to label him as such. That's a whole different issue with people constantly having to label one guy. H-Bomber has a video on it, I don't need to talk about it. Which means that he is not the only person to blame for these things. Ian Brennan, Tim Minear, and Brad Falchuk are also heavily involved in the shows he works on. Tim Minear is one of the culprits of Feud, Betty and Joan, which I will be talking about at length, so put another pin in that, but he's pretty much exempt from the rest of it because he's too busy queerbaiting a bunch of people with gay firefighters to get involved in anything else right now. And if you want more information on that, you should go watch Jane Mulcahy's videos. Brad Falchuk didn't work on Feud or Monster, which exempts him from some of my wrath, but not all of it, although it probably won't be mentioned in this video. Likewise, Ian Brennan didn't work on Feud, but he did work on Monster and The Watcher, so he's in my crosshairs too. Ryan Murphy has built his career on particular aesthetics and shock value entertainment with a side of camp and comedy, and I should be the target audience for literally all of that. And for some of it, I was sold, hook, line, and sinker. I was a Glee fan in high school, I loved American Horror Story for the first few seasons, I seem to be one of the only people on the planet who unironically adored Scream Queens, and I was a fan of Pose too. This video isn't trying to tell you that everything Ryan Murphy makes is bad. Far from it. In fact, I think the fact that he is capable of making good television just makes it more disappointing when he doesn't. Good art can still have flaws, and bad art can still have elevated parts. That's just a fact. Nothing is ever just one thing. My dislike of Ryan Murphy-helmed projects started during the AHS days, when the quality of the seasons started to dip. But it really solidified when Feud, Betty and Joan came out. This wasn't his first foray into semi-fictionalized real history. That was his American Crime Story series, particularly the OJ season that had come out before that. But I didn't know enough about that to dispute anything that happened in it. If you want to know more facts about that case, you should watch the Respect the Dead podcast about OJ. As a classic cinema buff, however, I knew a lot about Bette Davis and Joan Crawford. So this show grated at me. And not just me. Avril and Andrew of Movie Pictures, one of my favourite channels on this website, also had a lot of criticisms to levy at the series, most of which mirrored my own, so I will be splicing some of their clips in here too. I would also like to dedicate this video to Avril, who sadly passed away from breast cancer just over a month and a half ago. She was one of the coolest people around, and somebody I had always aspired to collaborate with one day. Movie Pictures were the first channel I subscribed to the Patreon of, and I watched every upload religiously since the incredibly early days of the channel. If you're interested in movie commentary, drag race commentary, or windows into obscure occult films you might not have watched otherwise, you should go and check out their backlog of videos because they're an absolute blast. It is a genuine loss to the world that Avril is no longer in it. And in her honour, I'm about to dog on Ryan Murphy for 40 minutes. And I'll also be linking a breast cancer charity too, because she was gone far too soon. And I would like to stop that from happening to more of us. Let's keep the community big. Please.
It's just on the whale carcass, and the shark rams the whale, and she goes, "Where are you taking me?" As if the shark is taking,
Anne speaks English, so she's like on this whale, she's like, "Where are you taking me? Where?" And the answer is nowhere. He just wants to eat you.
He's a shark.
Yeah, she like somehow makes it to a rock with this bird that's also friend. The seagull gets like, you know, its wing injured by the shark.
The seagull is essentially Wilson the volleyball from Castaway. Like, it's like her friend who's hanging out with her, who she talks to.
Or is the seagull her mom?
Oh, that's right. That's right. So the whole thing is the seagull's with her the whole time. And then at the very end, spoilers, she survives. And the seagull's on the beach, sort of just standing in approval.
But like, yeah, I watched over you.
Before I get into this, however, I do have a little bit of housekeeping to do. Let's start with this.
Relax! No.
I fear I'm losing the room!
Fetishes aren't a bad thing. Fetishizing things isn't inherently bad. If you want more information on this, see my Sex and Queer Media video. But let's be very clear about this right off the bat. It is not inherently bad to have fetishes or to fetishize things or people. It's just not. All fetishizing is to make something, whether it be a person, a thing, or an action, the object of a, usually sexual but not exclusively, fixation. People can fetishize almost anything. Something that is completely innocuous to one person can be deeply alluring for another, and that's extremely normal, whether your thing is feet, or BDSM, or piss.
Can you bring me up to speed on what adult baby diaper lover...
Honestly, it's all there in the name. You can kind of...
I'm sorry, do you shit in the diaper? I'm just really curious.
This is a whole thing.
Sure. Yeah, sorry, I can't...
No. It's fine.
Open up this dialogue.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Really? Okay.
Right.
So you said there's a division in the community.
There
are the
is.
people who poop, the people who are
poop.
just like, nah, I'll wait.
They're
Right?
just all about piss, yeah.
Wait. So it's not in thirds. It's not clean diaper.
Oh, I don't think so, no.
Something's happening every time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But you're now looking at me while, like, don't you know we all piss in the diaper? I just thought that you were wearing the diaper. Okay, so what is the etiquette?
What is the etiquette,
No,
John?
what do you mean? I'm just saying, like, let's say you're at the adult...
At an event, yeah.
At an
usually.
event, and you don't know that you're around a bunch of pissers, and so you poop, and everybody like, ugh, you killing the vibe.
Consent is king. They're always like, hey, no poop. Like, anything else is okay.
It's actually the rule for most parties.
What is bad is when you reduce or ignore everything else about the object of your obsession or overwrite it entirely. Even WebMD agrees that it only becomes a problem when it starts infringing on your quality of life or starts involving others without their consent. A sexual fetish is not a disorder by definition, but it can reach that level if it causes intense, lasting distress. Whether somebody is doing this by themselves or with a partner, if they're happy with it, then it's not an issue. Kruger says, as long as it causes pleasure and no one is being forced to take part. My patients come to me because they feel it's a problem, Rosenberg says. Their behaviors are not interesting, fun, or even sexy. They're not simply experimenting with novel means of sexual expression. They're desperate, compulsive, and sometimes so distressed by their behaviors that suicide is a consideration. When it's a disorder, it feels out of control. Someone might disappear from work or home to practice their fetish in secret. This fascination could also keep them from doing their job. This includes fetishizing something in your artistic creations. If you draw furry art or program inflation mods...
And then, oh fuck, okay. Oh, I didn't know I had that mod on.
I'll prove a point now, no mods. You see? No mods. Literally no mods.
Or you make media that focuses on the inherent eroticism of men's bodies, women's bodies, trans bodies, GNC bodies. That's all okay. Seriously, it's okay. To an extent, even Quentin Tarantino's feet stuff is okay, although I would like it on the record that despite my teenage adoration of Tarantino movies, I do think he's an utter piece of shit for his worldviews and in particular his support of Israel. His feet stuff is, obvious and weird. It's not illegal, and it's not even necessarily wrong. Those actors are being paid for a job. And there are conversations to be had about their actual level of knowledge and involvement in what is clearly more than just artistic vision from Tarantino. But as long as they're okay with it, and they're getting paid, it's perfectly fine. That includes the audience's participation, by the way. There is a certain level of buying in that we all do when it comes to engaging with any piece of art. If you're personally turned off or uncomfortable engaging with certain things, that's perfectly okay, and you can exercise your free will to simply turn it off and refuse to engage with that artist's work now or in the future. If you know they make things that you're not going to like engaging with, you can go cool, and when you see their name in the future, you can surmise you probably wouldn't like that. Just because somebody has what you perceive to be a strange or off-putting or even downright disgusting fetish or kink or hyperfixation doesn't mean it's inherently morally wrong, nor does it mean they're automatically maladjusted because of it. Take David Cronenberg, for example. A director famous for making grisly, intense body horror. In an interview with Vulture that subsequently went viral on Tumblr, this exchange took place. Have you done therapy?
No, never.
Have you purposely avoided it?
No, I just, honestly, I felt I didn't need it.
You're just all good.
Yeah, I'm totally cool. No problems. I had no problems to solve. My parents were really sweet, very sensitive, very understanding and supportive. They were lovely. I had a lovely childhood.
So you've never stayed up at night being like, why do I make movies where people pull each other's organs out of their bodies?
No, because I know that, as George Bernard Shaw said, conflict is the essence of drama. You don't make a movie about nice people who are all nice to each other. That would be so boring. You might want to live like that, but you don't make a movie like that.
I yearn for your placidity.
Well, the placid nature is genuine.
For some people, creating things in itself is their way of processing it, and for others, it simply doesn't affect their lives outside of the time dedicated to that fixation. I write a lot of hurt comfort fanfic, which involves grievously injuring my favourite characters. I've written about characters I care about getting assaulted and abandoned and being and I'm not doing it because I fetishize it, but because I'm processing things happening in my own life. Even if I was fetishizing it, it wouldn't be a problem. I'm just telling you there's a distinction between the two things. I've written sex scenes that don't do it for me personally, but I know make sense for the characters I'm writing. There are things I do fetishize to an extent, despite my famed asexuality, because as mentioned, fetishes don't always have to be sexual, but they rarely make appearances in my actual artistic output. Sometimes it just be like that. The idea of piss kinks gives me the ick personally, but I don't begrudge anybody who has one, as long as they're finding willing and consensual participants. And actually, to refer back to that dropout clip, WebMD mentions that community specifically. Still, some fetishes can be harmless. A recent study on adult baby diaper lovers found that among nearly 1,800 men and 140 women who report having this fetish, most said they were comfortable with their fetish and that it wasn't a problem. The same can be said of people who enjoy bondage, discipline or domination, sadism and masochism, commonly known as BDSM, Rosenberg says. As long as everyone agrees, then chances are no one's getting hurt in a way that is extreme or permanent and everyone's happy with what's happening. So with that all out of the way, when I talk about Ryan Murphy's fetishization of violence and degradation, I'm not necessarily kink-shaming or telling you to throw out his work because of it. I just wanted to highlight it as a reason I find his work harder and harder to swallow.
It was an innocent mistake.
And what if I were to just innocently murder you, Will? I'd still have to go to trial. Probably get off with justifiable homicide.
It's no big secret that a lot of Ryan Murphy's output involves some level of gratuitous violence or sexual degradation, or both, and most of them thrive in their engagement with taboo topics. That's essentially his whole brand, even including Glee to an extent, as much as he could get away with anyway. I think my biggest problem with Ryan Murphy in this regard is the fact that he doesn't seem to be able to acknowledge that that is what he's doing. You know, he talks a big game about wanting to make people confront the dark reality of life, or whatever, but seems incapable of publicly acknowledging that so much of that is his own fetishization of that dark reality that he's putting on display. In an interview with Netflix after the release of the second season of his Monster Anthology, he said,
"As an artist, I'm somebody who's always, even when I'm not trying to, I guess, drawn to provocative things. In the case of monsters, it is, by its nature, controversial. It's tackling very difficult subjects, and I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with that. And when they look at anything that dares to talk about something, they get confused as if it's conditioning it, and it's not. It's merely asking the question. And I think this show last season and this season really holds a mirror up to people and to society, and it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. I think it's good that they're uncomfortable.
And to an extent, I do agree with this. If you only ever engage with topics you're comfortable with, that's how you become a Republican who's terrified of trans people and immigrants because you don't understand them and everything you don't understand is big skewy. We should explore taboo topics. We should hold up a mirror to society and ask why it makes us so uncomfortable. We should try to see things from alternate perspectives. But on the other end of the stick, patting yourself on the back and boasting about your obsession with controversial topics makes you insufferable to be around too. We've all known those proto-incel boys in school who were just a little bit too obsessed with violence just for the sake of violence. And even if it came to nothing in their real life, at the bare minimum, it's off-putting. I have a big video in the works on author responsibility and how there's actually a lot of nuance between portraying something and romanticizing it. And as with fetishizing, I'm not looking to paint with a broad brush and say that any depiction of taboo actions is endorsing it. Nor am I necessarily saying that romanticizing bad things is inherently bad, especially when you're trying to interrogate that romanticization, a la Lolita or Wuthering Heights. But good God, does it feel like every male filmmaker who attempts to make a film about culture can't help but portray said on screen and misses the point of why that's not necessarily the choice to make. Because there is a line somewhere, right? And maybe that line is different for everybody. Murphy obviously doesn't feel that he's crossing it, and maybe you're watching this and you're thinking I'm being a big SJW or the friend who's too woke or whatever. That's fine. Feel free to comment telling me all about it. I really need the engagement. Also, please hype this video, like, subscribe, sign up to my Patreon, send me money on Ko-Fi. But for me, even if I can move the line in regards to his other projects because of the nature of fiction and interpretation, it's much harder to swallow it when it's based around real people, some of whom are still alive. When Monsters Menendez came out, a big part of the backlash was on the portrayal of the story, where the narrative seemed to not want to side with anybody, but in doing so, seemed to endorse things it probably shouldn't have. I'm going to cover this more in a later section, don't worry, take this pen. But one of the other things people took issue with was Ryan taking this story of two real men who are still alive and still in jail and telling a version of it where they're engaging in some kind of incestual relationship with each other. That's distasteful, to say the least. And 100 other video essayists have covered it. We were all rightfully icked out by the whole thing. And yet the audience backlash seemed to have swerved Ryan completely.
I also think there's been some misunderstanding. For example, there's an incestuous part of the show, but it's so tiny. It maybe is less than 1% of the show, but people have glommed onto that as if we're presenting it as fact. No, we're not. We're presenting it as a theory, one of many theories that exist about this case. So we're not advocating for anything. We're merely presenting things that were discussed then and now. I wish people could understand that a little bit better.
Ryan talks about these shows like they're documentaries, like he has a responsibility to try to not take sides and to show every perspective. But A, that's not what a fucking story is, and B, these aren't documentaries. If you're going to fictionalize something, it needs to find a perspective and stick to it. And also, even documentaries do that. God's Not Dead are terrible movies, but they have a message they're working towards with their creation of what they believe the world is like, and their persecution complex around their conservative Christianity. Which means that when I watch them, I can evaluate them as a story, and I can evaluate them as a person who holds different values to those extolled in the films, and I can draw my own conclusions from that. It's much harder to do that with something like Monster because it seemingly delights in refusing to pick a single perspective at all. And if you're going to fictionalize real people who are still alive, maybe you should make some effort to get that story right instead of throwing in random things to titillate the audience because it's your brand or whatever. But like I said, I'll get into that more later. Put a pin in it. Take this pen. Hold this pen. Keep holding onto the pen. There's so many pens. There's a perverse kind of glee that Murphy seems to take in the backlash on all these projects, reveling in it rather than trying to figure out if any of it has any merit. He seems to take pride in the concept of the backlash itself, rather than why it's happening. That makes sense when you consider his wider body of work, because he's always tried to push the envelope and create something controversial enough to stir up buzz. He did it with Nip Tuck, Glee, American Horror Story, and Scream Queens, and he'll probably keep doing it until the heat death of the universe. And when you're fetishizing or glorifying violence in the context of a horror show, no one bats an eye. Or at least, they shouldn't. We should engage with it critically, of course. It is possible to overstep it even in the horror genre, but to suggest that horror shouldn't depict horror is a very conservative take, even when it's coming from supposedly left-wing circles. Weirdly puritanical. But when you take that singular focus and you turn it onto the fictionalized depiction of real events, gets a bit ropey. Depicting Dahmer's relationship with his victims in a way that almost romanticizes his relationships with them or downplays the severity of his actions isn't great. Doing that and then still depicting the violence he did to those real human people who existed, also not great. Depicting the Menendez brothers both as the victims of their parents and as emotionless psychopaths who were incestually encouraging each other to do a murder is really uncomfortable. Again, these men are alive and can watch the show. Depicting Ed Gein with almost more nuance and humanity than you do any of his victims, trying to make the audience engage in a discussion of nature over nurture in a way that is attempting to humanize this man, while also clearly relishing in the violence they can depict in his story, is frankly fucking gross. As Anna Newman pointed out in her response to the show, What Ryan Murphy Got Wrong About Gein, the shift in focus from vulnerable victims to the killer and made-up ties to his criminal streak reinforces harmful ideas about which victims deserve public sympathy. I understand Murphy's attempts to critique famous retellings of Gein's story, most notably Psycho, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Silence of the Lambs, but he missed the mark. His execution was confusing, switching between his own inaccurate retelling and fake clips from the movies themselves. If he intended to show how many films were inspired by Ed Gein and twisted to appeal to the fetishization, why was his own version also false and dramatized? This is an issue I also had with the Blonde movie a few years ago and The Idol show. I made a video about it. You should go watch it. I feel like I'm just constantly repeating myself on the channel, but that wouldn't happen if people didn't keep making the same mistakes. As she points out, Gein didn't kill his brother Henry. He never used a chainsaw on his victims. There's no evidence Gein was ever interviewed by the FBI or contributed to Ted Bundy's capture. Evelyn Hartley's disappearance was never linked to Gein. And the thing that angered me the most, and actually made me want to write this video, Ed Gein did not have a romantic or sexual relationship with Bernice Worden before he killed her. Murphy invented a romantic and sexual relationship between Gein and a real victim of his, Bernice Worden, the hardware store owner. In reality, Gein admitted he'd never had a sexual experience due to his strict religious upbringing, making it highly unlikely he knew Worden intimately before killing her. This is the third time in a row that Monster, as an anthology, has invented a fictionalized relationship related to the killers, and once again, it's seemingly to humanize the killer rather than give any insight into the victims at all. Because, you know, if they cared about depicting the victims with any humanity, they wouldn't be lying about their final few days on Earth. And the fake relationship they made up in the Menendez series was literally just to titillate audiences and get buzz going. It's nothing to do with telling the true story, or even with telling a good story. He's just trying to stir up controversy as a way of bringing more eyes onto the project. Which is made all the more frustrating because it's not as if people wouldn't watch it otherwise. People love crime dramas. And they love them even more when they're based on real events. You don't need to make up fake humanizing moments for your monsters to slot neatly in between scenes of those monsters committing horrific acts, because that's when things stop being fetishizing in a healthy way and they start to affect others. These victims' families are still around. And even if they weren't, even if they were long dead, I'd still think twice about desecrating their corpses for fun. You know, like Ed Gein did. Those are real people. Real people who were murdered horrifically, and you're seemingly having more fun with the murder than any other part of the story. Doesn't that ever give you pause? Murphy seems unbothered by this, and has repeatedly doubled and tripled down on how proud he is of the controversial nature of the shows. It did not do him any favours last year, and Netflix seemed to have learned their lesson with this season, because Charlie Hunnam is the one doing most of the press this time around. Which feels a little dodgy, throwing him out to dry like that, but we move. He did sign up for the show, so I can't feel too bad for him. In one of the big interviews about the show, Charlie and Ryan discuss what the story they are trying to tell is, and Charlie says this.
I knew a little bit about this man who'd been living somewhat in isolation in the Midwest in the 50s and making furniture and such out of human skin, but I did not know his impact. What's amazing to note was that he radically transformed the perception in society of what a monster was. Prior to that, we were portraying monsters as Frankenstein and Dracula and werewolves. After Ed Gein, the monster became us. We're all afraid of the boogeyman. Deep inside us, we have a fear of something terrible lurking in the shadows, waiting to whisk us away. Horror gives us a safe way to look at that fear, and maybe by facing it, we become a little less afraid. It's like a version of exposure therapy. Also, maybe it's good to remind ourselves that there are things lurking in the shadows. Maybe it's a lesson that you shouldn't go poking around in the basement at midnight when the cat goes missing.
And he's right. Horror does do that. But framing a show based around a real serial killer as horror is wildly irresponsible to me. The horror movies based on what he did, you can say that about. But to posit that this show is a version of exposure therapy is drinking the Ryan Murphy Kool-Aid. And I'm sure that'll be the next season of Monster if we're not careful, where he paints the victims of that cult as entirely complicit and humanizes Jim Jones to make sure we understand that sometimes people do bad things because they had a complicated childhood. Charlie continues drinking that Kool-Aid right up until the last few words of the interview, where he says,
I think we've done a beautiful job of humanizing him for good and bad. There's a lot of reasons to feel empathetic towards Ed, and there's a lot of reasons to be repulsed and hold him accountable for what he did. But I think you and Ian did a fantastic job walking that middle ground.
I couldn't disagree more, Charlie, but you keep drinking it if it makes you happy. Who am I to get in the way of your free will? But even then, Ryan Murphy didn't actually write this season, he just produced it, and he's still the one doing interviews about it. Ian Brennan is the one responsible for this season's atrocities, but we're barely hearing from him at all. In the same way people think Nightmare Before Christmas was directed by Tim Burton, people will continue to laud Ryan Murphy for Monsters because his name is all over it and he's the one on the press tour. And yeah, this season is entirely Ian Brennan's fault. But it's not like Ryan Murphy is blameless. Ryan Murphy set up that template for Brennan to continue with. For the first 2 seasons, it was about as co-written as credits could get. And he's continuing to take credit for this season publicly. So for as long as he's pushing himself as the creative genius behind all of this, I'm allowed to point the finger back at him. And here's where I want to transition expertly from fetishization of violence to fetishization of misogyny and girl boss feminism, which is where my rant about Feud, Betty and Joan finally comes into play.
Hello and welcome to the Women's Amazing Women in Women Awards.
Feud is kind of the perfect thing to over-fictionalize and make camp. Specifically in the ins and outs of the feud itself, because we have a bunch of stories from onset, on the record, about how these 2 women behaved, and it would be very easy to extrapolate a campy, diva-ish miniseries from that. Feud, Betty and Joan is not that. As Avril and Andrew said in their video on the show, one of the biggest crimes Feud commits is not allowing us to feel happy or enjoy the silly, campy elements of the show because it's so up its own ass trying to convince us that these women are miserable and that we should be observing their story as a cautionary tale or anti-inspiration porn.
And now Joan Crawford has a sad and meaningful moment about the demise of her career. And I was like, oh. But like I was having a really good time and now you're bumming me out again? Like that's what, and that was the moment where I went, oh, that's what it is. Literally every time I'm like, yes, bitch, this is hilarious. Then I'm like, oh, this is so sad.
Yeah, that's true.
It takes it away from me every time.
That's true.
And that's what I don't like about it.
That's fair.
Like I realized, I was like, oh, that's what it is.
Yeah, that's fair.
And the whole episode was about like, you know, hagsploitation and these movies are an embarrassment, you know, or whatever, and Baby Jane is a joke and all these things, and I was like, that's not how I see them. And maybe that's with time,
right?
You know, when I wasn't there, and, and it was all about degrading the old stars, and I was like, oh, I just love that these old stars are getting work. Like when I was watching Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, I was like, yes, Mary Astor, I'm so glad you're getting work. And Betty Davis and Olivia de Havilland, like all of these people showing up who probably hadn't worked in a little while.
Sure.
I was like, yay!
And it was a good movie.
That's how I see it. Yeah, I don't see it as like, oh, this is trash.
As Avril expresses, it would be really easy to see these women's lives as inspirational. That they were so driven to act that even long after the industry moved on without them, they still took roles, even if they weren't the most highbrow. But instead, the show is insistent that we feel bad for Joan, that we partake in this misery communion and nod solemnly as we pass it on. Feud doesn't fetishize violence like Monster. Instead, it fetishizes misery. and misogyny.
I don't understand why this show is determined to paint Betty and Joan purely as sad, pathetic figures.
Seriously, though.
Like, it seemed...
Particularly Joan?
Particularly Joan.
But, like...
They're acting like these women never had a nice day in their lives.
Right?
Whole
It was like,
episode, I was like,
you should feel bad for them. You need to feel bad that they...
You ring that bell.
Shame.
Shame. No, you shame.
No, you.
No, shame.
No, you. Shame.
No, you.
No, but it was just like so absurd. I don't know. It just was so overwrought to the point for me that I was like, fuck you. I don't feel bad for them. I don't feel bad for you. Go fuck yourself. Who are you?
It's her last movie. It's this insane movie where she plays like a scientist who's trying to like reach out to this ape. I was having a good time with it. But anyway, she has to go to England.
Oh, look how low she's fallen. Oh, she's sunk so low. Oh, she's like changing in the back of this van. And yet you could tell the same story as like, oh, look, she was so determined to keep working, to keep trying to find roles. She would do it. Did she care that it was in a van? Not enough to stop doing it.
Because she wanted to work, because that was her life.
She loved acting.
Great.
That's a lovely story.
I think that's fabulous.
She was so sad and miserable, and she couldn't, like, it was just, why did you gotta go there?
Andrew, they were literally playing This Is the End by The Doors over the sad montage of her, like, doing this movie. And I was like, what is the Suicide Squad? What's going on?
This show's version of feminism is one that says that the only reason these two women disliked each other was because of a mess of manipulative men behind the scenes who stood in the way of what could have been a great friendship. And nothing has ever annoyed me more than the faux feminism of saying these two women could be besties if only it weren't for those dastardly men who get in their way. As if that's somehow not extremely misogynistic.
Yeah, if they had become allies and looked to how much they had in common, I think about how much stronger they could have been together. Not only would their lives have been easier, but their bank accounts would have been fuller. They had more in common at a certain point in time when they made Baby Jane than any other people on Earth. The fortunes conspired to keep them apart, and that was the tragedy. I don't think there's ever a winner in a feud. It's about emotional pain and an inability to conquer the pain.
He really thought he ate with that, you can tell. But as Averill pointed out,
guys, they can hate each other. Not all women get along, and it doesn't mean that, like, women tearing women down and all this stuff. Some people don't get along. And that's
particularly
okay.
who are competing for, like,
the same things and who are like polar opposites
and constantly compared to each other, even though they're different and whatever, and they have a different personality. Like, clearly, Betty Davis's personality was very different than Joan's.
Right? Oh, well, if they're not friends, then they're absolute enemies,
right.
And that's bad because of this, and this, and men did it to them. And then everyone else is like their children or their mate, like their literal mate.
Right.
You know, it's nobody that can like challenge them. Like I feel like Elvira would have been a nice counterpart to that, and Agnes Moorehead would have been a fabulous counterpart to
particularly the Agnes Moorehead thing, because I love the idea that it's like, what was their relationship with Agnes Moorehead, right? And that she then went on to get nominated for this role. Was it competition
with her too?
I don't know.
What was it?
Or was it just that they were perfectly, congenial?
Civil.
And
I don't know. I want to know.
I want to know.
That's what I want to know.
Women are allowed to just dislike each other. It's actually more feminist to allow real-life women the agency to just fucking hate each other. Even if that hatred is built on nothing. Even if these women were petty and vindictive and nasty. That is who they were. Whole people with rational and irrational reasons for doing things. Claiming that they were being puppeteered by the industry is reductive, and by painting with such a broad brush, you remove any of the actual nuance that idea can have, and worse, it makes them look pathetic. Like they couldn't take care of themselves or understand their own stories or obstacles. The industry was bad. It was misogynistic. Still is. But telling the story this way is gross and boring. There shouldn't have to be articles that come out after every single episode of the show fact-checking extremely basic things. Here are just some of the things they changed that diminished both the women and the supposedly feminist message he was trying to peddle. Fiction. In the show, Davis's husband served her divorce papers in their home, but in real life, she was the one to serve him papers while they were performing together on the World of Carl Sandburg tour, which he was soon let go from, replaced by Barry Sullivan. Hey, Quick question. Why are we literally depicting something as the opposite of what it was? And taking away a woman's agency in her own divorce in this supposedly feminist show? Fiction. During filming, it seems Joan, not Betty, was the star to get along with their co-star Victor Buono, although Betty later apologised to him for any rudeness. She was a trooper, a real professional, Buono said of Joan. He seemingly made Betty Victor Buono's friend in the show because Buono was gay and Betty was a gay icon, and that's an easier button to put on things than the actual truth, which could have been a more interesting story, but I guess we'll never know. Just because Betty's a gay icon doesn't mean she automatically gets along with every gay person. Fiction. Despite Joan saying she and director Bob Aldrich had private rehearsals during their previous film, Autumn Leaves, and Betty kissing Bob at the end of the episode, there's no real confirmation that either woman slept with him or had an affair with him. Before agreeing to join Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Betty asked Bob if he had ever had a meaningful relationship with Joan, to which he said, "The answer is no. Not that I didn't have the opportunity." According to Betty's autobiography. As the producer-director, one of the challenges of his job was to show no partiality of any kind to either of his female stars, Davis wrote, and he didn't. Why are we, in any way, implying that either of these women had an affair with their director when there's no evidence of that, and it clearly perpetuates backwards ideas about women sleeping their way to success and in no way riffs on that or subverts it, but literally just portrays it as if it happened, you miserable fucking cretin! Sorry? I got a little heated for a second. Let's move on. Unclear. There's never been concrete proof, but there are old Hollywood rumours that Joan did appear in pornos when she was younger, and MGM spent thousands of dollars buying every copy they could find. They were reportedly titled The Casting Couch and Velvet Lips. I'm really glad that we've perpetuated unsubstantiated rumours of a woman selling sex to get somewhere in her career. That's super awesome and not at all infuriating. If it were true, which it might be, there are conflicting reports from Crawford herself as well as her biographers. It could be tragic or empowering, depending on which angle you choose to take. But Murphy seems to think of it as deeply embarrassing and regretful and something worthy of shame, or at least he wants the audience to perceive it that way. And hey, maybe Joan would have as well. But it's hard to know, because of course Ryan perceives it this way. How could he sell us the misery porn otherwise? Fact. Betty Davis was roasted on the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast, which ran for 10 seasons and had stars making jokes about other stars.
So speaking of, things that they just didn't seem to get when they're talking about the roast.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you saw what they did to her in that roast, and she hated every minute of it, and she was mortified or whatever, right? Meanwhile, someone had literally sent us the roast, and I watched it, and it was great.
Yeah.
And the whole time, Betty Davis is just having a blast. Yeah. She's sitting there like, "Oh, stop it, you. Oh, my God."
Back in the days where queens were still ladies, and Joan Crawford was king.
And Joan Crawford was king.
That was really weird.
It was so weird. I was like, you guys have literally seen... We did not see the same footage, apparently, because, what the fuck?
No.
Joan used to borrow Betty's bras to use for shoulder pads. And then in 1963, there was...
Shoulder pads.
Did she tell Joan how bad she felt about the roast?
No. And I think she regretted it.
They were like, she really regretted, saying yes to that and all those things. And I was like, what? That did seem very odd.
Did she say that to people?
I mean, it could be in, a biography or something.
And she's just a great actress, and so she seemed like she was having a great time?
Well, it was just the same note, too. It was like,
right.
We can't just let her appreciate this or be self-aware or not be a victim. We have to make it sad that she's a victim of the Hollywood system.
Yeah, and the men and the sexism, and I'm like, I get all of that.
Totally.
But, can't she also have fun and laugh at herself?
And, own herself?
Yeah, and then just be like, these fucking bastards think they're calling all the shots when they have a tiny dick and they don't know what they're doing. And you're like, yeah, that's right.
This one pissed me off so bad, because even when they have footage to copy directly, they still make out like Betty Davis was a bad sport and found the roast to be upsetting, even though there is no quote anywhere that says so, and the footage of her from the actual show looked like she was having the time of her life. But not in Feud. No. In Feud, it has to be a commentary on how she's aging and people are laughing at her. Instead of just a woman with a strong sense of self and a sense of humor who enjoys a bit of light ribbing for entertainment. The whole thing is so fucking humorless, it's embarrassing, especially considering Murphy's previous oeuvre, which are fun and campy even when they're treading the line of tastefulness. The lack of fun in this show only makes it all so much worse.
I feel like nothing has really changed in the business. There's that feeling the show deals with women turning against each other because they feel there's only one space atop the pedestal. They're vying for that space. I feel like the way to get around this is to have women and minorities in positions of economic power in the industry. Greenlighting power, development power, running companies. And I do think it's getting better on the business side. But for actresses, the biggest tragedy of their lives is that when they turn 40, the phone stops ringing. Whereas for men, they're just getting started.
Once again, I want to agree with him. The industry is harder on women, and it's especially harder on women who are visibly aging. That's all true. It was even more true back then. But just because those statements are true doesn't mean your show did a good job of backing that thesis up in a coherent, non-sexist way. Making a potentially fun story into a dour tale of women who are unable to succeed or even enjoy the few successes they do get is not the emotional catharsis I think he was going for.
It also just doesn't seem like any of them has any agency.
No.
It's like, oh, they're doing this because other people made them like this.
And I'm like, own yourself. Betty Davis was a stone cold bitch, and rightly, she was like,
oh,
yes. She's like, and what?
This show feels kind of condescending to me. To the women. It's like, ooh, weren't they so sad? Isn't it so sad what happened to them and how sad it was?
Well,
and everyone's so sad. It was sad.
So Joan is going around, because she's actively lobbying for Betty Davis to lose the Oscar, right? And so she's going around to all the other nominees and asking them if she can accept for them, right? Well, at the end of the Sarah Paulson scene, she says, like,
well, she needs it. And besides, Hollywood should be forced to look at what they've done to her.
Poor you.
Yeah.
You're so sad.
Why can't it just be like, oh, fuck, you are a bitch.
Yeah.
And that's kind of great. But also, it's kind of fucked up. You have a light undertone of how sad it is that she's doing this. Let us
me
decide
come to the realization that this is sad. Let me go on that journey and be like, yes, bitch, you totally take that Oscar. That's petty and sad. But, I can still kind of love it.
That's my problem with this whole show,
It just shows you. It tells you.
It tells you what you're supposed to be feeling. And I'm like, no, show me, get me there. Here's Catherine Zeta-Jones to tell you about how hard it was for a woman in Hollywood. And it's like, just show us how hard it was for a woman in Hollywood.
Yes.
Also, the actual famous part of the feud only lasted for 3 of the 8 episodes. So that's just a pacing and storytelling problem on top of everything else that annoys me about this show. And then there's the Olivia de Havilland of it all. Olivia de Havilland was alive when the show was airing, and not only did she watch it, but she was pissed. The creators of Feud used my identity without my consent and put false words in my mouth, including having me publicly calling my sister, Joan Fontaine, a bitch. The show was designed to make it look as if I said these things and acted this way. I feel strongly about it because when one person's rights can be trampled on this way, the rights of others who are more vulnerable can be abused as well. She tried to sue the creators of the show, claiming they misappropriated her name, likeness, and identity without her permission and used them falsely to exploit their own commercial interests, inflicting emotional harm and sullying her reputation. On the one hand, I do agree with some of the experts that had she won her lawsuit, it would have caused irreparable damage to the industry, especially in regards to biopics or films that bear passing resemblance to real events. It would bar the telling of true stories without the permission of those depicted, said Jennifer Rothman, a Loyola Law School professor and author of a forthcoming book, The Right of Publicity, Privacy Reimagined for a Public World. This would effectively shut down critical commentaries about real people, whether in movies, television shows, or written biographies, documentaries, and potentially even in news coverage. This is a chilling prospect. I don't agree with her suing them, and she did eventually lose her suit on the grounds that it would interfere with authors' rights to dramatize historical events. Suing them would have set a bad precedent. But Feud did deserve flack from Olivia de Havilland, and she absolutely deserved to talk shit about Ryan Murphy until the day she died. At age 104, by the way, the absolute legend. Being able to fictionalize a real person isn't the problem at large, nor is it even depicting them negatively. Like I said, when stories have a perspective, their depictions of certain characters or actions helps the audience to draw their own conclusions about those depictions. Maybe you watched I, Tonya and it entirely changed your mind on that whole series of events. Or maybe you watched it and were unmoved from your original stance. But either way, the film did what it set out to do. It told a story from a perspective a lot of people hadn't considered, and it presented its thesis to you and allowed you the space to decide what you thought. And maybe you have your own problems with I, Tonya or other films of that ilk. I can understand that too. But I have so much more of a problem with Ryan Murphy's work and his incessant need to both sides every issue until nothing has meaning anymore. Which makes the fact that he's writing about real people so much harder to swallow. You can dislike that I, Tonya took Tonya Harding's side, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have told the story. You know? You can just decide that you don't agree with it.
I was there, man. Saw it happen, man. Saw the whole thing, man. Happened to me, man. Happened to me.
Presenting multiple fictionalized versions of events about real people who are still alive without consulting them or attempting to get the facts right is morally reprehensible. I mean that shit. It's one thing to pick a stance and write something based on that, which can be successful or abhorrent depending on how well you depict it. I feel like I need to clarify something here as well, because I'm about to go on a big rant about telling stories about real people, and I'm not saying to do away with it entirely. In fact, my entire university dissertation was telling fictionalized versions of real people and deciding what I thought their perspectives might be. Specifically because of how their stories had been changed by the world at large around them, and specifically men. But like, the whole point was that I was taking their stories back from those men, and then I had to justify that in the text because I'm essentially doing the same thing by deciding what I think these women would have wanted to say, right? There is an ethical problem there that doesn't have an easy answer. I'm not saying that you can't write about real people that existed. I did it. I will continue to do it, probably. The difference, I think, is that I put in a lot of fucking research, a year of it, in fact, into those women specifically, into trying to find their voices and discover what their perspectives were. I did the very best I could not to put words in their mouth that I thought they might have disagreed with. And I might have got some of it wrong. It's entirely possible I got some of it wrong. I think the big difference for me is in writing something to back up your own idea of what something is like versus actually looking into what these women would have wanted you to do. What do these people actually want to say? Did you ask? Did you check? You know, there are quotes about Bette Davis saying that her appearance on the Dean Martin comedy roast was like the lowest point of her career. But just because she believes it was the lowest point of her career, like as an actress, doesn't mean that she wasn't having fun as a person. Those two realities can coexist. Humans are complicated. We had an entire lecture and workshop at university in like second or third year about not just telling fictional stories of real life or like memoirs or things like that, but also on the ethics of that and on the ethics of telling a story about somebody else without their consent or knowledge, whether that person is alive or not. And we talked about that guy who wrote the book that was in Oprah's book club that it turned out lied about a bunch of stuff. And we talked about the ethics of that. And there was like a big disagreement in class as to whether or not that was okay because like, well, it was entertainment and it was for fun. It's like, yeah, but he was also claiming that it was true. And like, where does the morality lie in that? And I think it's a really interesting discussion. And we didn't come to an answer by the end of that lecture. Nobody suddenly decided, this is exactly where the line is. It is a complicated question and one that I spend quite a lot of my life thinking about, especially considering I eventually do want to get my university dissertation published as like a series of short stories. Like, I am very passionate about it. And I'm sure that other people would read that work and decide that I'm overstepping my bounds, right? These people are dead and they can't agree or disagree with the words I'm putting in their mouth. I just think it's important to talk about the perspective of it. Like, the reason why I'm able to nail down so many problems with Feud, Betty and Joan is because at the very least it has a perspective. The perspective is irritating, but it is a perspective, right? It's a perspective that these women were sad and miserable and the world was mean to them, and so we should feel bad about it. But because there is a perspective there, because there is a very clear steering of the audience towards what you want them to think, it's easier to decide as an audience what I think about it and whether I agree or disagree. And obviously in that case, I disagree. If you write a movie entirely from Ed Gein's side, that's a choice, but at least it's a choice. But it's entirely another thing to eschew perspective entirely in favor of throwing everything at the wall and then rolling your eyes at the audience for not getting it when they ask you why you did that. As he said when talking about the Menendez season of Monsters,
Murphy believes that there's a misconception that Monsters is taking one concrete position. In fact, there are as many perspectives within the series as there are characters. The show has a Rashomon approach where it talks about countless perspectives, and a perspective is not a lie. A perspective is an opinion, and the show has an obligation to all of those opinions, including the parents, including the lawyers, on and on and on. So I feel excited that the world is talking about these brothers and what they went through.
he doesn't care about the brothers. He just cares that people are talking about the brothers. No perspective, no substance, just talking. The idea that the show has an obligation to every opinion is, frankly, antithetical to fucking storytelling. And handcuffing yourself like that is only going to stop you from ever creating an actual cohesive narrative. Ryan Murphy is not the only person to do this, obviously. The other aggravating example I can think of off the top of my head is The Greatest Showman film, a movie that makes me so angry that my blood reaches the surface temperature of the fucking sun. I have so much to say about this film and its rosy depiction of a truly reprehensible human being, but luckily Average Ambitions did a big deep dive, so if you want to hear more about it, you can go watch that, and I highly recommend that you do. But the fact that the entire movie is propping up P.T. Barnum as this whimsical man who just wanted to give the freaks a place to be themselves, and he's played by Hugh Jackman. And how can you not like Hugh Jackman? And not the racist, manipulative, nasty, money-grubbing capitalist that he actually was, is, frankly, offensive. He'd probably be offended by it too, to be fair. The fact that the freaks are the subplot in the film and not the protagonists is a truly baffling decision, especially when you think about the message it's trying to portray. The fact that it paints Jenny Lind, once again, a real fucking person who existed, as some vindictive homewrecker who bailed on the tour just to fuck with Barnum because he didn't reciprocate her feelings.
This is going to ruin the tour! What tour? A world tour!
When reality is so far in the opposite direction, is offensive. We know for a fact that Lind donated most of her wages to charity and left the circus on good terms. Meanwhile, Barnum married a woman less than half his age, basically the moment his wife died. But sure, he's the one who's resisting the evil temptress Jenny Lind and being punished for the good deed of not cheating on his wife. And look, I might have taken that one particularly personally, considering that I spent all 3 years of uni studying in this building. Who's to say?
Riddle me this. Why, in a movie about a man who got his career started by leasing a black slave and then hosting a public autopsy once she died, where he charged admission, is a woman who donated the majority of her earnings to charity, parted ways with Barnum on good terms, and neither bankrupted him nor tried to break up his family, being portrayed as a home-wrecking hussy who financially ruined this good, wholesome family man? Are you fucking kidding me? Once I found that out, I just sat there like, oh, I'm gonna have to learn everything about this history now. I'm gonna have to learn stuff. The reality of the situation is somewhere between Jenny not enjoying the way Barnum marketed her so ruthlessly, but continuing the tour for another year under another manager, or after almost 100 shows, they were both completely over-touring to the point where Barnum offered her a pretty good deal to get out of her contract, so she just bought herself out of it. It's one of those things. The truth is somewhere between that. They also both made millions of dollars by today's standards, so no one left in financial ruin. This low-key just feels like they just made Barnum too perfect and they needed, like, something to break him in a way, but, like, not in a way where we couldn't root for him. Thus, he actually couldn't cheat on his wife. He's just, like, metaphorically cheating on his wife with the limelight.
And none of these story issues would even be a problem if they just didn't use the names of real people. Greatest Showman is a perfectly serviceable musical if you pretend it isn't about one of the only men in the world whose reputation for being a piece of shit has outlived the innovation that made him famous in the first place. People can forgive Hamilton for romanticizing the founding fathers because it does point out some of their flaws. To an extent. Not enough, but at least it gestures towards it. The difference between that and something like The Greatest Showman is that one of them feels, at a bare minimum, like the person who wrote it researched the hell out of it, even if there was bias involved. The other one refuses to have any perspective and dresses any conclusions up with a bland, feel-good message about loving yourself and calls it a day. It's genuinely frustrating. Like, even, okay, that 9/11 movie about the plane that went down, the one that didn't hit the towers or the Pentagon, that went down in a field because the passengers took hold of it. The thing with fiction based on fact, things that you can write about that are totally fictional in that factual story are things that we don't have any information on, right? That's why it gets a lot more leeway, right? Than when we know certain things happen and you write something that didn't happen, that's when it's frustrating, right? The Room Where It Happened from Hamilton. Writing about the fact that we can never know what happened behind those two doors. And Lin-Manuel Miranda would have been totally within his rights to write about what happened behind those doors. That would have been perfectly acceptable because it's something we don't know anything about. And instead he decided to write about the people on the outside of the door.
No one really knows how the game is played, the art of the trade, how the sausage gets made. We just assume that it happens, but no one else is in the room where it happens.
Those kinds of moments in history are exactly the kinds of moments that you can fictionalize in your stories, provided that you stick with the parameters of actual storytelling and a perspective, and you don't go directly against what those people were actually like when you're trying to tell a true-ish story. Take the 9/11 movie, right? There are things about that we know happened. They did get hijacked. The passengers did realize that something bad was going to happen and that they were going to be used to kill people, and they took the plane over and they crashed into a field, knowing that they were going to die, right? That is a thing that happened in history. And the movie they made about it, it's a compelling action movie. It's interesting, but it makes certain people on the plane into cowards for the narrative. There are people who don't want to attack the hijackers because it scares them and they're coward, and it's framed as cowardly. And we don't have any proof that those people did that. And it's okay to do that when you're writing a fictional movie. It's a lot less okay to do that when you're writing about real actual people who did actually all die taking down that plane, picking members of the plane who didn't do that. That's when you're just trampling all over ethics.
You're just writing what you want to write.
Yeah.
To fit this narrative that you want it to be.
And it's seeming more and more, yes.
And I don't know if I'm here for that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, so you're making things up and you're putting words into these women's mouths, essentially, and you're manipulating the situation to try and fit this 2017 narrative.
Definitely. And this was somewhat similar to my problem with the O.J. Simpson, Ryan Murphy show. It was very entertaining and well written and all this jazz, but there was this sense when you're watching it but how do you know that happened? And what I wanted was a disclaimer saying this is, a fiction based on a fact. You know, because I feel like a lot of people are going to be watching this and be like, oh, this is exactly what happened. And I'm like, I don't think that's true.
No.
Writing about real people isn't inherently wrong, nor is writing about serial killers or violent historical events. But if you're not going to do any of the actual work to research or get the facts right, or write something that is actually in opposition to what happened, then you should at least have the common decency to scrub the serial numbers off it and sell it as the fictional story it is so obviously trying to be. If you want to write a compelling story inspired by the macabre life of somebody where you get to be as crass or screwed up as you want, you're allowed to do that. In fact, Ed Gein is kind of the perfect example of that, because people fucking did do that. Writers being obsessed with Ed Gein's horrific actions was the reason we got Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs, and essentially the birth of horror cinema as we know it. And none of them claimed to be telling the true story of his life. In this series, we see how directors like Alfred Hitchcock and Tobe Hooper used Gein's story as inspiration, making him a Hollywood character rather than platforming his actual name as a known one. They've cashed in on the Gein machine for their own benefit, it's clear, but it's also the very same thing that Murphy is doing. The hypocrisy of it all, the way in which Murphy has clearly used Gein's crimes as inspiration for American Horror Story and has now based an entire series on him, just undoes the intended outcome of it all. Can you really be a critic of the way we consume true crime and the glamorization of it all if you too are one of the people taking home a check indebted to these stories? And I'm not saying that you can't grow and evolve and realize that what you previously did you no longer agree with, but my god, this isn't the way to do it. Ryan will take pot shots at those movies specifically, but then not turn that lens inwards, which fascinates me. The idea that these writers and directors are used to bolster this faux moral quandary about why we love the macabre so much is silly, especially when you remember that none of those writers actually used his name in their fictional creations. Sure, they were inspired by the stories, but they weren't platforming him or trying to make him into a folk hero or even an anti-hero. They were just following the news and then coming up with their own ideas. You know, like how creative people do? But this is somehow seen as the same as our current obsession with true crime and serial killers, at least in the context of the show. This third season was so desperate to tear the fourth wall down, to hold a mirror up to the audience and say, look, you're participating in this. You're part of the problem. But only insofar as they could smugly look down the barrel of the camera at you.
You're the one who can't look away.
It's a sin. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you. I was so fucking mad.
It's less asking the audience to critically engage and more baiting the audience with how far they're able to get up their own asses. Ian Brennan, the show's co-creator, said in an interview with Variety, his story was bent and twisted like a silly putty image, and the most interesting layer was turning the camera on ourselves, on Ryan and I, and on the audience. Oh look, we're doing the same thing. We're obsessed with this guy. Later in the series, we see Geen speaking to Nazi war criminal Ilse Koch, who tells him, don't let anyone call you a monster. You are a human being. How poetic! Lest we forget the actuality of Geen's crimes, the ghastly details of which are showcased throughout all the episodes. Weirdly, in the last episodes of the season, there's an attempt at some kind of redemption arc for an elderly Geen. He realizes that people have been telling his story for him, becoming inspiration for serial killers like Charles Manson, Ed Kemper, Jerry Brudos, Richard Speck, all of whom Geen meets in a dreamy haze in the hallowed hallways of his psychiatric institution. With all due respect to Ian and Ryan, which is none, what the fuck is wrong with you? People have been telling his story for him, so we decided to do it again, but with more sympathy towards him than towards the victims, and then we're going to blame the audience for engaging with it as if that isn't exactly what we're begging for them to do. Aren't we so clever? Fuck you. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. Fuck your lazy storytelling and your whataboutism and your inability to just pick a perspective and follow through with it. And your smug self-righteousness and your bad narrative pacing and your inability to see outside of yourselves because you're too busy sucking each other off to introspect for more than 5 seconds. Whoa. Calm down there, Talis. Holy shit, that was probably too much. Take that back. Try that again.
One thing I learned in my time as president.
Principal.
You can't force public opinion.
I used to love Ryan Murphy's output. There are parts of it I still do like, even in spite of myself, but my god, has Monster killed any desire I had to keep tuning into his new projects. In case you were wondering, All's Fair also has the same problem that Feud does, with centering girl boss feminism in a way that's actually very reductive and kind of offensive to women. But hey, at least it's only fictional women he's diminishing this time. And it's at least attempting to be somewhat camp, so I guess there's that.
This is not just a Ryan Murphy thing by any means, but I think in the outraged algorithm, just the cultural landscape that we have today, there is media that is created not really for an audience to enjoy, but simply for controversy, for clip farming on TikTok, fodder for every journalist and content creator alike to talk about how this is the worst piece of media they've ever seen, which even when that review is so cutting and so brutal, still ultimately leads to a handful of people watching the show they otherwise wouldn't have cared about. Kim has a miscarriage. This is another thing that they kind of just have one scene about this miscarriage and then we're moving on to the next. Like, it feels really strange for such a heavy topic. But they do show one of their clients just turning to Kim unprompted and saying, "You get it. I can tell that you never want kids."
I know you get this. We're not all put on this earth to have kids.
Everyone knows, and Ryan Murphy knows most, that women love to presume and verbalize their thoughts about other women's fertility. When we're not syncing our periods, that's all we're talking about. The ultimate defense of this show is that it's camp. Duh, no lawyer would actually look or act the way that they do, and isn't that just so funny, silly, haha. But then the show also delves into deeply serious topics like sexual assaults, transphobia, domestic violence, and there isn't really a delineation between what's the drama of the show and the comedy. Every choice in the show feels like it can be interpreted either way, so that Ryan Murphy and his team can change the answer to fit who they're talking to. If people like it, the show is intentional and artistic. And if it's bad, it's supposed to be bad. Silly, it's camp.
And look, I'm sure if you dissect Glee or American Horror Story, it'll be easy to find more examples of his less than stellar views, which were easier to ignore when they were few and far between and propped up with actual good writing and flashy entertainment, but have gotten more prevalent since he was basically given free rein to head whatever projects he wants with almost no oversight. Ryan Murphy is basically a money factory for Netflix, or any other network that he produces for or creates on, so he's not going to learn that lesson or introspect anytime soon. God, I wish he would. He did used to be a good writer. He used to put effort in. Not just in subverting expectations, which has become one of my least favourite phrases on the planet, but in meeting them in the first place. His writing was funny and intelligent and irreverent, but still approachable and narratively consistent most of the time. Maybe it's that he's surrounded by yes men. Or maybe he just doesn't care about quality anymore. Or maybe he really does think he's a genius. But either way, Ryan Murphy's name on a project no longer makes me tune in. In fact, it's more likely to put me off entirely now. Once again, I'm not saying he's not allowed to make fetishistic content. It's okay to make fetishistic content. But then, do that. Don't make a show like Monster and then claim the audience is the real problem so that you can pat yourself on the back for your own compulsive infatuation. Stop trying to justify it to yourself and just write the thing you want to write. I think he gets off on the controversy more than anything else, and that is what I find the most repellent about the whole thing, because it's soulless. There's no artistic merit in stoking controversy for controversy's sake. It's just gross. And frankly, boorish. And grotesque and boorish in combination is not the kind of foundation any show should be built on. Ryan Murphy's output is so offensive to me because it's part of a growing trend among mainstream media to push things towards a more conservative perspective while dressing itself up as left-wing or progressive. This is anti-progress, but it's desperate for you to pretend it isn't. The slow creep of conservative values into every piece of media is dangerous and scary, and I'm tired of pretending it's not happening. When I say that Ryan Murphy is peddling conservative views, it's so easy for people to dismiss it because he won't label himself that way, and he's a gay man, so how could he possibly be conservative or hold progressive values? Let's ignore the fact that he's both white and wealthy. Those two things shouldn't count because he's gay. I'm just tired, man. I'm tired of giving him the benefit of the doubt while he continues to make worse art and fetishize violence and degradation and misogyny and misery, and not in an entertaining way. I'm really tired of hearing him be praised for things he simply isn't doing. He's not holding up a mirror to the audience. He isn't tackling misogyny at the heart of Hollywood. He's just getting off on misery and basking in the backlash he receives. Because more than anything, the backlash is the point. And in a world where AI is being pushed as a substitute for art, I don't want to settle for creations that don't care about perspective or narrative or intentionality. Even if I don't agree with your stance as a writer and filmmaker, there is still merit in engaging with it. But if you refuse to have any stance at all, why should I care about what you made? Didn't think so.
And that's what you missed on Glee.
I'm not even saying that he's being intentionally insidious. I'm sure that from his perspective he's not. But that old adage rings true. After a certain point, malice is indistinguishable from stupidity. And like I said, it's really hard to walk this line where when you have complaints about art being bad, because there is such a thing about bad art. I'm tired of pretending there's not. No art is above critique. But then on the other hand, I agree, there is also such thing as bad art takes. You can be wrong in your presumptions of what a piece of art is about. Those two things can both be true. And I'm sure I have been wrong about art before. Fuck, I might be wrong now. Who knows? But it's just one of those frustrating things that is starting to get to me, where it feels like any critique being levied at anything now is more to do with how it looks and the tweets that people can compose about it than it is about it from an actual artistic perspective. There's no actual critique happening except to basically be like, look at what we did. Look at what we did, guys. Guys, did you see what we did? It's like, okay, but why did you do it? For what narrative reasons did you do it? What story are you telling? What perspective do you have? It grates at me. I'm not saying we stop writing fictional stories based on factual things that happened, this weird middle ground. Like, it has yielded great art. It has. I'm just saying that we need to be better at figuring out what the point of it all is. Why are you telling this story? Like, actually why? Not the stupid bullshit reasons you keep touting to the press. Actually, why are you telling this story? Do you want to tell a super sympathetic, empathetic life story of Ed Gein? If so, just do that. And then audiences can decide for themselves whether they want to engage with it or not. Do you actually just want to make horror stuff based on that kind of gratuitous violence? Then just do that. People have been doing that now for almost 100 years. Like, since we've created cameras, people have wanted to create snuff films and grotesque horror stories and everything else. Humans are obsessed with the macabre. You can just tell those stories the way you want to tell them. It frustrates me, this just constant, like, lack of perspective that is coming with every new thing that comes out at the moment with Netflix stuff. It just feels like nothing is built to actually tell a story anymore. It's just there to play in the background or for people to talk about on Twitter, and it's exhausting. Anyway, please engage with this video, comment your opinion. If you disagree with me, you go ahead, you tell me exactly why I'm wrong. I love comment engagement. Spread this, please. Like, even if you, I think Kaylin Conrad pointed out, even if you share the YouTube video just to your own email, it counts as being shared somewhere, which boosts me in the algorithm. YouTube has absolutely decimated my channel over the last few months, as it has with most other small creators. It's not doing a good job at the moment, and I don't know if there are other options. Please like, share, comment, subscribe to my Patreon, donate to my Ko-fi. I never know how to pronounce that. I know it's got a coffee logo, so I assume it's coffee, but every time I look at the letters as they are, it looks like it should be pronounced Ko-fi. And take care of yourselves out there. Don't engage with media that is going to piss you off. I shouldn't have watched the most recent season of Monster. I knew it was going to piss me off, and I did it anyway. I appreciate you all tuning in and listening to me rant about this for a while, and I hope that you're all having a much better time out there than I have been for the last few months. And Merry Christmas. This is probably going to be my last video before Christmas, so oh god. Merry Christmas, everyone. 안녕. A big thank you to Batman Ultra 7 for voicing Cronenberg, Archivist Shepard for voicing Ryan Murphy, and Pillar of Garbage for voicing Charlie Hunnam. I appreciate you all, and I'd also like to give an extra special shout out to all of my wonderful patrons who have really kept this channel going over the last year or so, and especially the last couple of months when things have been not super great in my life, even outside of, you know, the world imploding. It means a lot to me that there is some kind of community that I can come back to, and I'm going to try and be more active in the Discord in the new year. This is obviously predicated on things not continuing to be shit and going wrong, but I want to be more active in this community that I'm creating, and I really like having a corner of the internet where we can have discussions like this. So yeah, I really want to thank all of you so much for just being cool. I cannot tell you how grateful I am for that. Truly, truly, truly.